Halliburton double team, shot clock at 4. Nembhard's got to put it up. Step back, his three-pointer. Nembhard knocks the three down. Timeout, Knicks.
Anthony attacks. Hibbert denies him at the rim. Block number 5 for the Pacers center.
Wow, what a play.
Miller for 3, and he got it. Reggie Miller with a clutch tray, and it's 105-102. And a steal. Miller retreats to the three-point line and hits again.
Tie game.
Reggie Miller made a 3, stole the ball, raced behind the three-point line, and hit again.
Look, I know people are like, aren't you worried about going back to New York City and calling a game? No. I've owned this city. I've owned this building. So why would I be worried about walking on out there?
Harper to get it in. Throws it to Ewing. Ewing surrounded. 2 seconds to shoot. He drives. He shoots. He missed. He missed. He missed. We ring the bell, baby. Ding dong. The witch is dead. And the Pacers have won it 97-95. And we're going to Disney World.
Hello, Pacer fans, and welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show, your go-to podcast for all things professional basketball in the state of Indiana. I'm your host, Logan, and today we're previewing the 2025 Eastern Conference Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. This isn't just another playoff series. It's the renewal of a rivalry that helped define Eastern Conference basketball in the 1990s and early 2000s, from Reggie Miller's iconic moments at Madison Square Garden to years of physical and emotional postseason battles. These two franchises have a long history, and now they once again meet in the Eastern Conference Finals, healthy, reloaded, and looking for a trip to the NBA Finals. For the second consecutive year, the Pacers are headed back to the conference finals. Once again, they'll open the series on the road, this time under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden. It's a test of resilience, execution, and maturity for a team that's already proven they belong on this stage. And coming up, we'll be talking about the schedule for the series, looking back at how these teams played against one another in the regular season and in the past, talk about the matchups, and so much more. At the end, I will give you my keys to the series for both teams, preview the games ahead, and make my predictions for this Eastern Conference Finals showdown. So sit back, relax, and let's talk some Pacers basketball. That's right. You're not in your time machine. You are not back in the 1990s. The Pacers and Knicks will once again square off in the NBA playoffs. Number 3 seed New York Knicks versus the number 4 seed Indiana Pacers. And we're going to read out the schedule now, and we'll get into just what this rivalry has meant for the league going forward. What does it mean for these two franchises? Because I've got a lot to say about the way that the Eastern Conference is shaping up and how this series could be the launch of a new, I guess, era in the Eastern Conference, at least in the Eastern Conference, and maybe the NBA, because the final 4 teams in the NBA playoffs are 4 new superstars, and I think we're turning the page on what could be a very exciting decade or more of NBA basketball. So let's talk about that schedule. The Pacers-Knicks kickoff on Wednesday, May 21st. That is Game 1 at Madison Square Garden at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. Game 2 will be at Madison Square Garden again Friday, May 23rd. 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT, About City ESPN. Game 3, Knicks at Pacers, Sunday, May 25th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. That is the same day as the Indianapolis Speedway, so you got Racers and Pacers once again, as we have had in years past, where we have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Game 4, Knicks at Pacers, Tuesday, May 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. Game 5, Pacers at Knicks, Thursday, May 29th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. And that is, if necessary, Game 6. I think I said Game 6. That was Game 5. Game 6 will be Knicks at Pacers, Saturday, May 31st, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. And then Game 7, Pacers at Knicks, Monday, June 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. So that is the schedule. We kick off this Wednesday. I'm recording this on Monday night. And sorry, I apologize if I get my words all mixed up. I just landed a couple of hours ago, so a little bit jet lagged, but had to record this Eastern Conference Finals preview as I was out of town when the Knicks did advance to take on the Pacers in this conference finals matchup. They beat the Boston Celtics to advance. I think that was on, I want to say was that Friday night? Yeah, Friday night. So Pacers have their matchup. We're into the series preview. If you're not watching on YouTube, I do have a rundown of the different items that we're going to talk about in this episode. We've got Pacers and Knicks, obviously. The rivalry renewed. We're going to talk about some of the games and matchups and series that have taken place over the last couple of decades that will, I'm sure, live fresh in a lot of fans' minds, because this rivalry goes back decades and spans over every generation. And it's pretty cool that Gen Z, and I think it's Gen Alpha, are getting a little bit of taste of what it was like to have an Eastern Conference rivalry like the Pacers and the Knicks. We're going to talk Knicks recap, what they do over the season, but we're really going to talk mostly about the postseason, because we've gotten so far into the postseason now that really regular season did matter in the way that they were seeded, but a lot of teams take on different personalities and lose their identity or gain some perspective on what they're supposed to do to advance through the NBA playoffs. And I think the Knicks have done a pretty good job of that. Pacers recap. We'll talk what have the Pacers done over the last couple of series that I think we can take away from those series and kind of put them into this Eastern Conference Finals, and some takeaways that we can take into this Eastern Conference Finals showdown with the Knicks. And then we'll talk about rotations and matchups, keys to the series, and then our predictions for the series. I'm going to have 5 predictions plus, I guess 6, because I will have my 6th prediction be what I think the outcome of this Eastern Conference Finals will be. So stay tuned to that. It'll be at the end of the show. But again, if you're not watching on YouTube, we are over on YouTube, but we are also anywhere that you would like to listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or I guess anywhere that you would get these podcasts. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about this series. And we're going to talk by starting with the history of this rivalry and what it has meant for this league. Before we do that, I did want to say the Pacers have not been to an NBA final since the year 2000, when they took on the Los Angeles Lakers and lost. They have never won an NBA championship. They have won ABA championships before. And then the New York Knicks had not won an NBA championship since 1973. That was before the merger, though, and haven't been back to the NBA finals since 1999. In the year 2000, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that was the last time they were there. But the Pacers sent them home to advance to their NBA Finals matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. So we've sent each other home quite a bit. We've had some really good series. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the ones that are iconic, ones that you will probably remember if you are a Knicks fan or a Pacers fan. There's a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, maybe you're a younger fan, or you're listening to this and you're not really a fan of either team, or you're a new fan. But there's a great documentary called Winning Time. It's Reggie Miller's. It focuses on Reggie Miller and that rivalry with the Knicks back in the 1990s, and it talks about the Pacers finally getting to the spot where they wanted to and eliminated the Knicks. And in the audio just before this podcast episode, you can hear Mark Boyle with the famous "Ding Dong, the witch is dead" on the radio call when Patrick Ewing misses that easy finger roll in the lane, and the Pacers finally get past the Knicks and advance to the next round. So it's an exciting documentary. It's one that will teach you a lot about the history between the Pacers and the Knicks. It'll teach you a lot of history about the Pacers, a lot of history about the Knicks. What did that look like? I mean, these were two franchises, storied franchises, that just went head to head for so very long. And then we got a little bit of a renewal when Paul George era came around, and you had Paul George, Roy Hibbert with the Carmelo Anthony, Tyson Chandler rivalry. And then not too long ago, as in last year, the Pacers send home the Knicks in that Eastern Conference semifinal round, and they beat them in 7 games and ended that game in Madison Square Garden last year. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I want to start in our time machine and go back to 1993. And I'm reading this I got this from the Pacers website, so I'll kind of read some of the highlights from the article that was written about these series. And 1993, that was the year I was born. So again, this rivalry goes and spans across many generations. I mean, my dad, it was like ingrained into us, right, to hate the Knicks. I mean, there's not another team that I think Pacer fans and Pacer fans for many generations have hated more than they've hated the Knicks. So I would say between them and the Pistons, these two rivalries go back to when I was a kid, and even before, even right at the year that I was born. So Starks headbutts Reggie Miller and sparks the start of this rivalry. The Knicks were were heavy favorites in the first playoff meeting between the two teams. New York had the top seed in the East after winning 60 games in the regular season, and the Pacers had just gotten into the playoffs and sat with a 500 record as the 8th seed. The Knicks took the first 2 games at Madison Square Garden, but the series is best remembered for what happened in Game 3 at Market Square Arena, as Reggie Miller recalls in his 30 for 30 documentary called Winning Time, when he went to shake hands with Knicks John Starks prior to the game starting, and Starks ignores him. Reggie says in that documentary, from that point on, I made it my mission. I was going to embarrass this kid. Miller was feeling himself on that particular night, knocking down shots and exchanging trash talks with Starks for after every make. At one point in the third quarter, the two came face to face. Near midcourt, Starks lost his cool, headbutts Reggie Miller. Reggie does his theatrics, grabs his head like and I think in the documentary he said Dale Davis, I think, said that if he had a packet of ketchup, that Reggie probably would have smashed the ketchup on his head to make it look like there was blood. And Starks was ejected. The Pacers roll to a 116-93 win, and Miller scores a game high 36 points. That game was the only game that they would take in that best of 5 series. The Knicks would come back and win game 4 2 days later to close out the best of 5. But that got the rivalry started. And that's kind of where that documentary starts. I mean, it goes back to it shows you a clip, I think, of the moment where Reggie, I can't remember if it's the 8.9 seconds clip or if it's like the ding dong, the witch is dead kind of clip. But then right before it shows what happens in those clips at the very end, it then goes to, it flashes over to Reggie and Reggie getting drafted and him coming to Indiana and this building of this Pacers team throughout the 90s that ultimately leads to this rivalry with the Knicks. And that starts in 1993 when it officially kicks off. That's when you have Reggie and John Starks, who John will be at the games. You'll see John sidelines in the supporter section or whatever they call that, the celebrity row, or I don't know what they call that in New York. I think it's Madison Square Garden. I think it's called Celebrity Row, but they're like the alumni. But it shows all of them. Like Ewing's there, Starks is there. They just got Carmelo's usually there. I mean, it spans from those guys like the Mason boys and all, with Dale Davis and them, and it ranges all the way up until like most recent Knicks like Marbury and Amari Stoudemire and all of them. So it's a lot of fun because you do see a lot of that rivalry come to a head, especially when Reggie goes there to call games, because Reggie will be on this series. So he will go to Madison Square Garden calling the Pacers, Knicks, and the Eastern Conference Finals. He'll be in a place that is constantly yelling at him. Last year, if you remember, Josh Hart took Reggie's headset, pulled the ear away from him and said, I think they're saying F you, Reggie, because they're chanting F you, Reggie, as the game comes to an end. In game 1, the Pacers lose the first 2 games at Madison Square Garden, but Reggie was there calling the game. And Josh Hart made it a statement to go over and say that. And then you've got the infamous Tyrese Halliburton picture where he's holding that chokehold on his own throat, like Reggie did when he was in Madison Square Garden. He put his hands through his throat to say that the Knicks were choking. So, I mean, this series, I feel like we're going to get the rebirth, or I guess just the rekindling of the flame, I guess, that never really went out. It was sitting there. It was kind of had a small twinkle. And then all of a sudden the Pacers come in and throw some fuel on that, beat the Knicks last year, and now the Knicks will be out for redemption. But this all goes back to 1993, this long standing rivalry. 1994, Reggie taunts Spike Lee in a comeback victory. Perhaps the most iconic image of Reggie Miller ever to Pacer fans is him making the choke sign at acclaimed director and Knicks superfan Spike Lee. The image is from Game 5 of the 1994 Eastern Conference Finals when Miller led the Pacers to an improbable comeback at Madison Square Garden. The 5th-seeded Indiana Pacers made their deepest postseason run, knocking off the Orlando Magic in the first round before upsetting the top seed Atlanta in the Eastern Conference semifinals. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? We're the 4th seed this year, but knocking off that top seed to get to the Knicks with a chance to go to the NBA Finals on the line. Both teams won the first 2 games on their home court, so the series shifted back to New York for Game 5, knotted at 2-2. The Knicks appeared to be on their way to another victory as they were up by 12 entering that last quarter. Miller caught fire in the final frame, erupting for 25 points in the fourth quarter as he hit shot after shot. And he made sure to let Spike Lee know, because Spike Lee's chirping. They're down 12 at the fourth. And you can see Reggie in the documentary. You can see him in the highlights too. He kind of looks over at Spike Lee, because Spike Lee, if you've seen Spike Lee, he does it even now. He gets up and he's got that he always gets that towel, or he gets out onto the floor sometimes, and they're like, all right, you got to get off the floor. He's not way out on the floor, like impacting the play, but he'll get close enough to where the refs are like, all right, you got to get back. But he's, yelling at Reggie. They're booing Reggie. They're booing the Pacers. They're having a good old time. They're up 12 points. Well, Reggie goes for 25 in that quarter. Pacers outscored New York 35-16 in the fourth to steal that game, and Reggie Miller finishes with 39 points. In a post game interview, they asked him about Spike Lee. Reggie goes, Spike who? Because, the whole time he's literally directing every interaction at Spike Lee. And he says in the documentary, he wanted Knicks fans to know that the reason why that their beloved Knicks were being sent home was because this guy in the front row, Spike Lee, was just giving him an earful, and he was going to make sure that they knew it was his fault that they were going home. So as memorable of a game as you can possibly imagine, Pacers go up 3-2 in that series, but the Knicks get the last laugh as they go in and win Game 6 in Indianapolis, close out the Pacers in Game 7. But again, Reggie, this close to getting him. Mark Jackson comes over. He's like, you know what? We're going to take down the Knicks. This next year, we're going to take them out. And in 1995, 8 points in 9 seconds happens, and the Pacers eliminate the Knicks for the very first time in these postseason rivalries, I guess you can say. If Miller doing the choke sign is the most famous image, this one is the most famous and most memorable moment between Reggie Miller and the New York Knicks. Pacers and Knicks met for the third straight year in 1995, this time in the Eastern Conference semifinals. In Game 1, the Knicks appeared to have wrapped the victory up. They were up by 6 with 18.7 seconds remaining. But once again, Reggie Miller rises to the occasion. After hitting a quick 3 out of a timeout, Knicks forward Anthony Mason attempted to inbound to Greg Anthony, but Greg Anthony slips, and Mason's pass goes directly over the head of Greg Anthony and into the hands of Reggie Miller. Miller quickly steps back, and the wherewithal to step back and hit that 3, knowing that they were down, that knowing that they could go and drill that to tie the game. It's amazing that he's 4 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet inside the arc, and he completely turns around, heads back, like sprints back to the 3-point line just to bury the 3 to tie the game. In the ensuing confusion, Pacers forward Sam Mitchell accidentally fouls Starks because he thinks that they're out or that they're down still. And then Sam Mitchell fouls Starks, not realizing the game is now tied. Once again, Miller taunted Starks in the Knicks guard, missed both free throws. Starks chokes away, and you can hear it in the documentary where they say that the players were looking at John Starks, and it just looked like there was just fear in his eyes. Like, I'm going to miss these. I think Patrick Ewing says like he looked at him in the eye and go, don't do it. And he misses the second one. And on the other end, Reggie Miller is fouled by John Starks, and Miller doesn't miss the free throws, making both the seal the most improbable victory in franchise history at that point. It wouldn't be a sweep, but the Pacers would ultimately prevail. Indiana got up 3-1, but the Knicks took the next 2 games to force a Game 7 winner-take-all at Madison Square Garden. Pacer fans, I know, were very nervous because they got out to this 3-1 lead in the series. The probability of you moving on is like 90-some-odd percent, 95, 96%, and they almost blow it. They get back to Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. But the final game comes down the wire, and as Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing are dueling, both players finishing with 29 points, Ewing steps into the lane, has a wide-open layup, and it hits and clanks off the rim, and the Pacers escape with a Game 7 victory, 97-95, and that is when the infamous "Ding Dong, the witch is dead" reigns out over the Pacer fans and Knicks fans nationwide. No, not nationwide, but Pacers fans Probably not Knicks fans because they're not listening to that broadcast. But that is a moment that lives in infamy for the Pacers. And the Pacers move on, beating the Knicks for the very first time in this rivalry, at least in the postseason. 1998, more Miller heroics. Pacers prevail again. The Pacers and Knicks didn't meet in the playoffs for the next 2 seasons, but in 1998, they match up once again in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Pacers took the first 2 games at Market Square Arena before the Knicks won Game 3 at Madison Square Garden. Game 4 was the most competitive game of the series, which featured more heroics from Reggie, who hit a 3-pointer with 5.1 seconds left to force overtime. Indiana pulled away in the extra session, winning that one 118-107 behind 38 points for Miller. Rick Smith had 23 points, and Mark Jackson had a double-double with 16 points and 15 assists. 1999 4-point play propels Knicks upset. Pacers wound up losing in 7 games to Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals. But it felt like it was finally Indiana's year in 1999 when Michael Jordan had announced his retirement. The second-seeded Indiana Pacers swept the series with Milwaukee and Philadelphia to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they faced the upstart Knicks, who won two series as the 8th seed. The 2 teams split a pair of games in Indiana, with Ewing notably injuring his Achilles in Game 2, an ailment that would keep him sidelined for the remainder of the postseason. Game 3 was the turning point in the series. Indiana had led 91-88 in the closing seconds before Knicks forward Larry Johnson was fouled by Antonio Davis and hit a 3, a call that still is very questionable to many of the Pacer fans today. Johnson completed a 4-point play to lift the New York Knicks to victory. The Pacers rebounded to win Game 4, but the Knicks took the final 2 games of the series, with Allen Houston's 32-point performance in the closeout game in Game 6, eliminating the Pacers. And in 2000, the Pacers exact revenge on the New York Knicks. The Pacers and Knicks meet again in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2000. This time, the Pacers got their revenge. Series opened at Indiana's new arena, Conseco Fieldhouse, which is now Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where the Pacers protected their home court by sweeping the first 2 games. Knicks did the same in Game 3 and Game 4 at Madison Square Garden, and the Pacers took Game 5 back in Indianapolis. In Game 6, Miller had another magical night in which would be his final playoff game at Madison Square Garden. The future Hall of Famer scored 34 points, going 10 of 19 from the field, and 5 of 7 from 3-point range, and 9 of 9 from the free throw line to lift Indiana to its very first NBA Finals appearance in franchise history. As the final buzzer sounded, you probably have seen this video picture of Reggie Miller jumping in the arms of Jalen Rose. And that is probably one of the highest moments of my sports watching, I guess, fandom career, especially with the Pacers. I can remember that. I was 7 years old. I do remember that. I remember quite a bit of the series against the Lakers. I remember Reggie's missed shot. I remember that very vividly. I think it was Game 6. But yeah, I mean, the Pacers ultimately lose in the NBA Finals in 2000. Again, running up against superstars is never fun, and that seems to be a trend for these Pacers. And then in 2013, the rivalry renewed as Roy Hibbert blocks Carmelo Anthony to seal a series win, while the Pacers and Knicks rivalry is one of the best remembered for those 6 playoff series involving Reggie Miller. The 2 teams had another memorable postseason battle in 2013. The 3rd-seeded Indiana Pacers and 2nd-seeded New York Knicks met in the Eastern Conference semifinals. The Pacers were a young upstart team led by all-stars Paul George and Roy Hibbert, with the Knicks had a very veteran squad built around scoring phenom Carmelo Anthony. Indiana took Game 1 in the New York Knicks against the New York Knicks before the Knicks rebounded in Game 2. Pacers protected home court over the next 2 games, taking Game 3 behind 24 points and 12 rebounds from Hibbert, and Game 4 thanks to 26 points from George Hill and double-doubles from Paul George and David West. Anthony scored 28 points in Game 5 as the Knicks extended the series, but the Pacers returned to Indianapolis with a chance to close it out on their home floor. Knicks were right there. I mean, up until the very end. Anthony drops 39 points in Game 6, and the Knicks led 92-90 with 5 minutes to go. And that's when you hear in my intro the Roy Hibbert block. Anthony spun past Paul George on the baseline and rose up with a right-handed slam, but right before he gets to the rim. I mean, I'm talking maybe a second, maybe less, before he slams it down on Roy Hibbert's head. Hibbert gets his hand in there, meets him at the rim, and just rejects it, swats it away. and somehow has the strength, like his hands bent backwards and just like throws it out of Carmelo Anthony's hand. That proved to be the turning point. Then the Pacers would go on to outscore the Knicks 16-7, and they would advance to their Eastern Conference Finals matchup against the Miami Heat, which is the game, or I think that's the Game 7 elimination game where they took the Heat to Game 7 and ended up losing that one. But the Pacers and Knicks, once again, meeting in the NBA playoffs. And then last season, 2024, the Pacers silenced the Garden with a historic Game 7 performance. It would be another 11 years before the Knicks and Pacers met again, but this time the two teams face off in the 2024 Eastern Conference semifinals, a series that lived up to be another one that went down in Pacers-Knicks lore. The second-seeded Knicks started the series strong, winning Game 1 and 2 in the Garden, behind 43 points from guard Jalen Brunson in Game 1. And then they followed that up with a easy Game 2 win against the Pacers. Pacers return home, essentially facing a must-win situation in Game 3 and ultimately come away with a dramatic win at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Tyrese Halliburton scores 35 points, Pascal 26, Miles 21. But the hero of the night was the Andrew Nembhard step back, who had just scored 5 points. He hits the biggest shot of the night and probably the biggest shot of the playoffs, I think, for the Pacers, dating back to last year. I mean, to this point, we've had 3 really good ones. I would say Nembhard, Tyrese Halliburton's layup against Giannis, and then the Tyrese 3 that he hits over Ty Jerome against the Cavs. Those are 3 of the ones that I think most Pacer fans in this generation will remember for a very long time. After Brunson hit a 3 to tie the game at 106 with 42 seconds remaining, following that Andrew Nembhard 3. Halliburton missed a 3 on the other end, but Aaron Nesmith came up with an offensive rebound to give the Pacers a second chance. Halliburton had the ball at the top of the key with the shot clock winding down, but then Knicks sent a double team at him. He dishes it to Nembhard on the left wing, and that's when he hits that 3, launching it from 31 feet that swished through the net with just 16 seconds to play. Brunson missed a 3 on the other end, and the Pacers hold on for a 111 to 106 victory to force to force it to go 2-1 in the series. The Pacers then come back and win Game 4, making it a 2-2 series tied, heading back to the Garden. The Knicks in Game 5 win 121-91. The Pacers take Game 6 back at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, 116-103. Comes down to a Game 7, Madison Square Garden. Pacers not really proven, but the Knicks completely falling apart. Josh Hart had an injury. OG Anunoby could barely walk up the floor with that hamstring injury. Mitchell Robinson wasn't around to play in this series. Jalen Brunson breaks his hand in Game 7. A lot of things just not going the way of the Knicks. And in Game 7, Pacers flip the script. The blue and gold erupt for 70 points in the first half and ultimately rout the Knicks 130-109. Pacers set an NBA record for best field goal percentage ever in an NBA game, converting 67% of their shots. Halliburton led 6 Pacers in double figures with 26 points. Siakam and Nembhard each added 20. Nesmith tallied 19 while going a perfect 8 for 8 from the field. Turner scored 17. McConnell had 12 and 7 assists. And that leads us to today, as the Pacers and the Knicks will head off on a journey in 2025, playing each other in the Eastern Conference Finals. So let's talk about it. The New York Knicks, the Indiana Pacers. We're going to start with the Knicks because we've already talked a lot about the Pacers. We've gotten into this rivalry, but what I wanted to say and why I went into the history of the Pacers and Knicks is just because I think there's a lot of talk from the national media that, this series isn't as good as the one across the way in the Western Conference, which is the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. But if you really look at the history of these two franchises, this rivalry dates back to the early 1990s, and it's been an ugly rivalry. I mean, you got fans even in today's era, today's NBA, like last night. If you didn't see this, I think it was Friday when the Knicks end up beating the Celtics to eliminate the Celtics. The Knicks fans are celebrating in Times Square. Earlier in the series, when the Knicks felt comfortable enough where Jason Tatum was hurt and they felt like they were going to win the series, I think it was the 3-1 lead when they took that 3-1 lead in Madison Square Garden. The Knicks fans were in Times Square saying F Tyrese. talking about Tyrese Halliburton. They were ready for him. They don't like the Pacers. They're already chanting about the Pacers. Well, after game 6 in Madison Square Garden, in Madison Square Garden, things get ugly as the Knicks fans are celebrating, jumping on billboards, climbing cars, whatever they do in New York City when that happens. There's a Pacer fan that was caught on video wearing a Tyrese Halliburton jersey, and he's walking through this huge mass of Knicks fans. I think there's like 40 some odd Knicks fans swarming this poor guy with the Halliburton jersey on. And then they start picking up garbage bags from the side of the road and hitting him and pelting him in the head with them. The poor guy just tries to get away from him. And then you can see some Knicks fans trying to stop them from doing it. And, it's not all Knicks fans, but it's already started. I mean, this back and forth between the fans that clearly do not like each other. You'll probably hear on X it's derogative in a way of like calling people from Indiana the Hicks, but you have this idea of the Knicks versus the Hicks, and it dates back to the 90s. This was an ugly rivalry for a very long time. I mean, you can hear all the comments made by the Knicks in that documentary with Reggie Miller about how they felt going to Indiana. And how loud and ruckus and crazy the Pacer fans were. But then you also hear the same from, Pacers fans where they went into the city and people, some of them were afraid to leave their hotel room because of how nasty some of the Knicks fans had been. So it's going to rear its head here again. I believe, I think it's going to get, the fan bases they don't like each other. There's a disdain there. I think most fans realize that it's a game, that rivalries are fun, and it's fine to heckle another fan, but to get physical with other people and really try to hurt other people, that's when it starts to cross the line. We can have our fun, we can talk to each other, but let's keep it civil. I think it's a lot of fun that this rivalry's returned. I think that this is great for the game, especially in the future. And we'll talk about what this series means towards the end of the show, because I think it means a lot more than just this Eastern Conference Finals and who advances to the NBA Finals in 2025. But let's talk about the Knicks. So how they get there: third in the Eastern Conference at 51-31. Pacers ended 50-32. So just a game off. Had they tied, the Knicks still have the tiebreaker because they did win the season series 3-1. And that's my next note here. Matchup numbers from this season. The Pacers lost the season series 2-1. Only win came at home on November 10th of 2024. They played 3 times. October 25th, 2024, Knicks win 123-98. The Pacers, that was that start of that stretch of the Pacers just not being very good for 25 games to start the year, which put them in a hole. Had they played like they played in Jan, like this would have been probably a top seed in the Eastern Conference, and they'd have home court advantage. But because they didn't take care of business, they end a game back behind the Knicks, technically 2 if you count the tiebreaker. But that's when that really started to escalate. I think when they lost that game to the Knicks, that's when you really started to see that there was something wrong there. Like the Pacers didn't show much fight. The Knicks, coming off being eliminated from them last year with the exciting additions of Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, this team came in firing on all cylinders and they smashed the Pacers. And it was an embarrassing 25-point loss at Madison Square Garden. So the Pacers then come back on November 10th, which is a couple weeks later, and they course correct some. They win 132-121. Still not in a good stretch of basketball, but they do pull out the win at home. And then February 11th, which is the most recent game between these two teams, February 11th, 2025, Knicks win at Gainbridge Fieldhouse 128-115. These are two of the best road teams in the NBA. When you talk about regular season schedule and how it ended, they ended pretty close, like neck and neck as far as road wins are concerned. The Pacers had a 20-20 record on the road. The Knicks 24-17, so pretty close. I guess not neck and neck, but a really close win percentage when it comes to games on the road. Knicks, again, very good road team. Pacers, a very good road team. Knicks are the second best road team in the Eastern Conference behind the Cavs. Oh, no, sorry. In the Celtics, I didn't see theirs because they only lost 8 games on the road. Sorry, they're the third best team on the road, those New York Knicks. So they know how to win on the road. That'll be something that we'll talk about because, it really, I mean, the Pacers' first 25 games, yeah, this is when it mattered. Like this, we knew this going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Unless we got lucky and ended up somehow with like Detroit, we weren't going to have home court advantage in the Eastern Conference Finals. However, that being said, I do feel like because of the way the Pacers play, that the home field advantage, or sorry, the home court advantage doesn't matter as much as it would with some of these other teams because of how good and how battle tested these Pacers are on the road and have been for the last couple of years. So Pacers lose that series 2-1. The Knicks probably feeling pretty confident coming into this series because they do have Karl Anthony Towns, who has owned the Indiana Pacers in his career. I mean, he's had a really good career. In fact, I don't think I pulled this one up, but I'm going to pull up Karl Anthony Towns' stats against the Pacers because I know the one for as he's played with the Knicks. I don't know what his all-time is, but I know he has hurt the Pacers in his career in the time he's been with Minnesota and New York. Okay, so here it is. So in his time against the Pacers, dating all the way back to 2015 is when they started playing against one another, Pacers and Karl Anthony Towns. Towns averaged 27.8 points per game, 11.1 rebounds per game. He's had 2.7 assists per game in those matchups, and he shot 56.1% from the field. From the three-point line, he shot 40% against the Pacers. So he's been a problem for the Pacers and has been for his whole career. And while I will say, and a lot of people will agree in the national media that, and I think that's what you have to do because Boston was the best team in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks went into the offseason, got Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns because it was an answer to how they were going to play against the Celtics. They knew that there was going to be a point in the postseason when the Celtics and the Knicks would meet up. I think then the Knicks probably imagined it being more of the Eastern Conference Finals rather than the Eastern Conference semifinals because nobody saw the Cavs coming. But the series ends up being played around early, and you could tell, even when Jason Tatum was healthy, that this Knicks team was definitely built to compete against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Now you flip the page over, and I would say that while Karl Anthony Towns has always been a Pacer killer, they really weren't shopping for Mikal Bridges to I mean, they obviously they're shopping for Mikal Bridges to beat the Pacers and the season, and then in the postseason, should they meet against each other. But that idea, I think, was Mikal Bridges can guard Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, and then you've got the ability, like with Josh Hart, to guard Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, OG Anunoby, same kind of thing. Jason Tatum was oftentimes who he would guard and the assignment that he had. So you had three really good defenders. The Knicks are built to beat them. Karl Anthony Towns, a more difficult matchup, obviously, for Al Horford or Porzingis. I mean, those are two not great defensive centers going against a guy that can bury threes, where now you've got to face Miles Turner, who's going to be a little bit better and more agile than, say, like an Al Horford or a Kristaps Porzingis. So I feel like the Knicks were 100% built to beat the Celtics. That being said, they're not really made foolproof to beat this Pacers team, and we'll talk about why. But Karl Anthony Towns is not he somewhat is the reason why the Pacers will have success against the Knicks because he does not defend very well. And I think he will have a hard time with the pace of play, but we'll talk about that. I just wanted to say, I wanted to preface that all by saying the Knicks did, yes, own the Pacers in the regular season. I actually felt like they were on a redemption tour for knocking them out of the playoffs last year. You could just tell there was a different kind of intensity when the Knicks showed up against the Pacers, kind of like what the Bucks did the Pacers this year too, where the Bucks showed up and they beat the Pacers most of the time or had the lead and should have pretty much clean sweep the Pacers in that season series. So again, I don't put too much stock in the regular season just because the Pacers were really bad all the way up through January, up until January, sorry. And then it's not until January, February they start to figure this out. But again, that's a game where they lose at home at Gainbridge Fieldhouse against the Knicks. But I feel like there's an intensity with the Knicks that the Pacers, while yes, can match that and know that that's a team that they'll probably face down the road in the playoffs. I would say that they're that typical let's go beat them because we're the underdog thing. The Pacers aren't the underdog in that game. They're probably the favorites in that game to beat the Knicks at home. But the Knicks just come in that night with more intensity, more of a purpose and focus of beating the Pacers, knowing that they probably needed that game anyway if there was going to be a tiebreaker, because at that point, the Pacers were starting to play a lot better. The Knicks really needed that game. And to be able to stay afloat from the other team. Oh, sorry, my cat scared me. If you're on the YouTube, you got to see me jump. But yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about just the regular season. Now, you look at the Knicks numbers, and the first thing I want to point out is just how much the Knicks players play in the regular season, because this is going to be a talking point, a really good talking point, I think, for this series, especially because of how much the Knicks rely on their players. And Tom Thibodeau doesn't really believe in a deep bench. They are not deep, the Knicks, by any stretch. They are 7 players deep, that when you look at the players that are going to play in this postseason. But I want to talk to you about the minutes played and how I'm going to do this, and the best I think that we can do to kind of understand, because I don't think you would really understand unless you know minutes really well. But I want to compare it to the Pacers. And I'm sure most of you know that, 37 minutes a night's a lot of minutes to play. But just to compare it to the Indiana Pacers minutes played this year, just show you just how little, I don't know if it's trust, but it sure seems like it, how little that Tom Thibodeau trusts his bench players compared to a person like Rick Carlisle, who runs 11 deep sometimes. So here we go. Let's talk about first the Knicks. So their leading minute getter from the season played in 77 games, 37.6 minutes per game, was Josh Hart. So he played 37.6. Mikal Bridges, 37.0. OG Anunoby, 36.6. Jalen Brunson, 35.4. Karl Anthony Towns, 35.0. Miles McBride, 24.9. Precious Achiuwa, 20.5. PJ Tucker, we're going to skip that because he only played 3 games. We'll skip, Mitchell Robinson, 17.1 minutes per game in the regular season, played 17 games. But you just look at all these minutes, and that's a majority of their minutes going to their first 7 players, and everybody else pretty much doesn't play, not on a regular basis. So you're talking about 5 players coming in that haven't really had much of a break all season, and they're not young. Like, they're not, they're older players. They're in their prime, but like, you look at their ages and the minutes that they're playing. So Josh Hart, he's 30 years old. Mikal Bridges, I believe he's also 28. So Mikal Bridges, 28. OG Anunoby, who last year basically fell apart, hamstring and all, looked very slow even before the hamstring issue because the Pacers just ran them to death. 27 years old. Jalen Brunson is 25, I believe, because I looked that up, and I think he was the same age as Tyrese. Well, no, he's 28 too. I didn't know he was that much older than Tyrese. 28 years old. And then Karl Anthony Towns, who's been around for a while, 29 years old. So again, guys that have had a lot of mileage on their legs already, playing more minutes than they probably have ever played in their careers, especially Bridges, Towns, Hart. Like, those are a lot of minutes to play. And just as comparison, Josh Hart, who led the Knicks all the way down to Karl Anthony Towns, who had 35 minutes, the closest pacer to any of those was Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese played 33.6 on average. Pascal Siakam, 32.7. Miles Turner, 30.2. Benedict Mathurin, 29.9. Nembhard, 28.9. Nesmith, 24.9. Toppin, 19.6. Shepard, 19.5. McConnell, 17.9, Jarris Walker, 15.8. So it gives you a really good understanding, just one, how deep the Pacers are willing to go into their bench, but two, how little it seems that Tom Thibodeau trusts anybody outside those original 7. So I just I think that's going to be something that we need to mark down and keep in the back of your mind as we go through this episode, because there's just so much wrapped up in that I want to talk about that I think benefit the Pacers more so than the Knicks. So looking at how good this Knicks team has been, Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns combined for more than 50 points nightly in the regular season. So if you look at their points total over the regular season, if you talk about Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns together combined 50.4 points per game combined. Then you drop off to OG Anunoby, who would average 18 points a game. Mikal Bridges, 17.6 points per game. Josh Hart, 13.6 points per game. Miles McBride, 9.5 points per game. Mitchell Robinson, 5.1 points per game. And the reason why I'm going to name those seven that you'll probably see some Precious Achiuwa, just depends on like foul trouble or Landry Shamet. You could see maybe Tyler Kolek randomly made appearances, but that rotation is 70, and it includes those starting 5 with OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges, plus Miles McBride, Deuce as they'll call him, and then Mitchell Robinson. So you've got 7 guys that the Knicks are going to rely on, where Rick Carlisle will more than likely play 10 players in this series, maybe 11, depending on Jarris Walker and what they do to use him as a body to maybe throw it at Mitchell Robinson or Karl Anthony Towns at times, maybe even Jalen Brunson for a little bit. It just really depends on what they use as far as 10 or 11, but the Pacers are more likely going to have 10. And if they shrink it, it'll go to 9. So again, I feel like the Pacers playing 2 more players, having 2 more fouls, I mean, it just opens up so much more as far as possibilities and opportunities for the Pacers and the ability to score with all sorts of different options. It makes them harder to game plan for. But the fact that they rely for 50 points to come from Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, and then the hope that the other 3 continue to score at the pace in which they do, and then you have to hope that Miles McBride can also provide you points off the bench. And Mitchell Robinson is not like a negative because of how little he can actually provide offensively at times, especially from the free throw line. Like, he's a good lob threat. He's good enough to where you have to kind of worry about what he's doing. But if you get into some deficits, you could see him being used as like a hack-a-shack where they foul him because he's one of the worst free throw shooters. So again, they rely heavily on Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson to do their bid. And then the Knicks bench, which chips in a league low 21.7 points while playing the fewest minutes. So they were the worst bench as far as production. And in the postseason, it's not been better. So again, you make the case for the Pacers' depth being a huge key where the Knicks will really struggle. Karl Anthony Towns has made a case for himself as being probably the best shooting big that there is in the NBA. Won the 3-point contest at All-Star Weekend a few years back, and career accuracy of 40% from the 3-point line, and stays right at that number against the Pacers. Towns, though, is coming off a Boston series in which he shot 3 for 19 from threes, which was 15%. Now, obviously, you take it game by game with these NBA playoff games because so much changes from game to game. I will say the only thing that I've ever really noticed throughout that stays consistent, especially in today's NBA, is the ability to shoot at a high clip and consistently if you're struggling. Because Donovan Mitchell, we saw, Darius Garland, we saw struggle. We saw Max Strus struggle as games went on and they weren't hitting shots. You can see it mentally affecting their ability to shoot 3-pointers or the confidence they had to make 3-pointers. That is one facet of the game, that and free throws, that I feel like once the confidence is shaken, once that confidence is no longer there, it's pretty hard to get it back. Like, it doesn't happen from game to game. Like, that's something that kind of lingers. Whereas a win or a loss doesn't really linger too much for teams. Home court, away from home, it can have an effect, obviously, but like it doesn't really linger too much. Like games are going to change based on the games. Rebounds and assists, they don't really, those fluctuate a ton. But a team's ability to shoot can fluctuate quite a bit, quite drastically, to be honest with you. Even when the Pacers started out cold, they would get water finds its level, I think's the saying. So the Pacers would eventually get back to at least a reasonable percentage of like 44, 45. And then they had one of the best true efficiency shooting percentages in the whole league. So, and have been historic at times in the postseason. So you see, Karl Anthony Towns, and you identify him as the problem, the thorn, the thing that I think the Pacers will struggle with the most. And Jalen Brunson he's Jalen Brunson. Like you're going to struggle with him some, but he also didn't shoot the ball particularly well in that series against the Celtics. He does shoot a high volume, so that helps him. But when he's not going well, he's forcing things. And if you look at that series, I mean, we'll talk about their series with Boston because we'll kind of recap what that looked like. But that series against Boston was just not good from the Knicks. But I think, I think it was game 6 was the game that really you look at, you can point out and say, all right, they looked a lot better in game 6. Defensively, they looked in tune, but it looked like the Celtics were ready to give up at some point. So you just had to deliver a final knockout, and they did pretty early on. By the second half, it was already over. So again, I think the Knicks coming into the series, they're not shooting it as well. They only averaged 105.7 points per game. And to be fun, the stats here in that, well, actually, you know what? Let's go back first. Let's go back to their first playoff series, which was against the Pistons, who the Pistons, very young team, don't have Jaden Ivey, didn't have Isaiah Stewart for the latter part of the series, struggle with injuries, and Cade Cunningham trying to feel his way in the playoffs. But the Knicks really didn't outplay the Pistons much in that series. Like I would say majority of those games, the Pistons actually look like the better team. The Knicks just won. They won one on a controversial foul call. They won games coming back after being down 8-10 in the final quarter. Like the Knicks look like they were willing to give the Pistons games. I mean, game 2, the Pistons go into Madison Square Garden, and after a game 1 loss, that was actually pretty close for the most part. The Knicks should have taken game 2, but they don't. They lose it 100-94. But then the Knicks win game 3 and game 4 on the road, which was huge, which were huge losses for the Pistons. The game 3 ended 118-116. Game 4 ended at 94-93. One of those was the controversial 3 call. Like the Pistons had a chance. They had an opportunity late into those games, both of those games, to win them, and could have very well had the 3-1 series lead heading back to New York. They go back to New York. The Pistons drop another game, or sorry, the Knicks drop another game at home on their home floor against, again, a very inexperienced Detroit team who is not as deep as this Pacer team by any stretch. A very young, inexperienced Cade Cunningham trying to figure it out his way. Had 2 very good veterans carrying the load in Tobias Harris, Hardaway Jr. Like they were playing really well in that series and carried the load when Cade Cunningham really wasn't. Jalen Duren. But again, the Knicks, I thought, deserved to probably lose that series. Like the Pistons were the better team for a majority. And it's crazy to say that because they go on to win there and they go on to win the Celtics series. And we'll talk about that. But the Pistons out rebounded them. I think that's a big difference. Like the Pistons aren't that's one thing where the Pistons are better than the Pacers. They rebound the basketball. So that's something I think the Pacers could look at and say, if we rebound the basketball just as well as maybe the Pistons did, and obviously they're not going to because they're not that good defense or rebounding team. But if like you stay close to this Knicks team, it should be a pretty good advantage because again, like I said, the Knicks were missing a lot of shots in this series. They weren't great against the Pistons. So again, like I said, looking at their shot percentage, looking at their ability to try to score against a pretty good defensive Pistons team, they didn't play very well. Field goal percentage 45% against the Pistons, 36.5 from the 3-point line. The Pistons were 45% and 32.4% from the 3-point line. So again, I think they shot it a little bit better from three, obviously, but we're pretty on par with each other as far as field goals concerned. Pistons also turn the ball over a lot, which is pretty common for an inexperienced team in the playoffs. But like I said, series ends 4-2, but I actually thought that the Detroit Pistons were the better team in that series. So then you fast forward to the next series where the Celtics played the Knicks. Now, this is a series that they had been prepared for. They were ready to go up against Boston because of the way that they had restructured their team. And the Knicks jump out to a 3-point win in game one after trailing by 20. Game two, same thing, trailed by 20. Boston shoots their way out of it. I think they were 25 of 100 from 3-point arc in games 1 and 2 combined, which, I mean, you're shooting that many 3-pointers, you're going to shoot yourself out of games. And that's exactly what the Celtics did. Celtics go down 2-0 against the Knicks on their home floor. Reigning champions, Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown's not healthy. Drew Holiday. I always say Aaron. Drew Holiday, not healthy in this series. Porzingis struggling with whatever illness he has. And then Jason Tatum eventually gets hurt in game 4. Yeah, game 4 against the Knicks. They end up losing that game. But again, I thought Boston was better than them in game 1. I thought game 2 too. They just shoot themselves out of it, being up 20, and then they give up these leads because they just kept settling for jump shots. And it was like, what are you doing? Like, put them away. They never did. And kudos to the Knicks for coming back in those games, down 20 in both of those games, 1 and 2. Come back, win it on the road, but very close games the Celtics should have won, games that the Celtics were a much better team for a majority of the game. Then you get to game 3, the Celtics win and really just stifled the Knicks offense. I mean, the defense showed up. They were playing with a much higher intensity in game 3 than they were in game 1 and game 2. I mean, at the end of those games. But the Celtics put their mark on that series, make it 2-1. And then game 4 was the Jason Tatum game that he was just going off over 40 points in that game. And then that's when he suffers the right Achilles tear that sidelines him for the rest of the season, maybe next season. But the Celtics right there with him. Now, I did think they were eventually just going to go on and lose that game, so it probably would have been an uphill climb for the Celtics the rest of the way. But again, it's a lot of guys that were hurt. I mean, you want to talk about the Pacers running through the postseason against hurt teams last year. You look at the, Pistons. You can look at the Pistons this year and say Jaden Ivey wasn't there. Had he been there, could that series have been different with New York? And then you look at the New York Knicks going on against Boston. Had Jaylen Brown been healthy, had Kristaps Porzingis been healthy, Holiday been healthy, what does that look like? Even if Tatum's healthy, what is that? What happens with the Knicks? Do the Celtics can they beat the Knicks with those guys healthy? Probably. So again, Knicks fans will point to the Pacers postseason last year of like, well, you beat us injured. Well, now the Knicks are kind of doing the same thing to other teams. And while I know Jaden Ivey's not necessarily Jason Tatum, obviously, but still, I mean, Jaden Ivey's a crucial part. Isaiah Stewart's a crucial part of that team. So, you can say the similar kind of things about the Knicks that the Pacers went through, but you can only play the teams that go in front of you. And that's what the Pacers have done. They've beaten the Cavs team, even though they've been dinged up with same thing with the Bucks with Damian Lillard and Giannis in last year's playoffs. So you can only beat the teams that are in front of you. But why I'm going on about, the Knicks and their series before is that I actually believe that for a majority of the series, the other team was better than the Knicks. And, that can change. They get in the series with the Pacers and it might be a more favorable matchup because of Karl Anthony Towns and what Jalen Brunson can do with an Andrew Nembhard or Nesmith, who had struggled at times to guard him last year. But I would not agree with most of the national media that will jump on the Knicks and say 5 or 6 games. Like, I just don't see I don't see the Knicks being better than the Pacers in a longer series. If this goes 6 or 7 games, it's going to favor the Pacers because it's the depth and the legs on the Knicks and how tired they'll be getting to even game 5. Like, game 5 will be brutal. Game 5, 6, and 7 for the Knicks will be brutal because of how much they've had to play in the postseason. And now you add a even more intense matchup, I think, with a healthy, knock on wood, healthy Pacers team who are probably healthier than they've been for any of the postseason series. Like, they've had a whole week to rest up again. So they are going to be firing on all cylinders. All their guys are going to be back to full health. Tyrese Halliburton's, wrist injury. Miles Turner kind of gimpy with that knee after game. I think it was game 3 game 3. So I think the Pacers coming into this are going to be a healthier team. The Knicks are going to struggle with that depth because of the minutes that I just read off and the ability of just the Pacers to be able to spread out the attack, where the Knicks are going to rely on 2 guys and then the other ones as good supporting role players, but they're going to need really big games from some of them at points. So let's get into lineups and rotations. And well, actually, before we do that, Pacers, talking about the Pacers and what they've done. Actually, you know what? I've skipped a whole thing. Let's talk about the playoffs and the Knicks. So the Knicks in the playoffs, OG Anunoby, 40 minutes per game. Mikal Bridges, 39.8. Brunson, 39.0. Josh Hart, 37.0. Karl Anthony Towns, 35.7. Miles McBride, 19.3. And then Mitchell Robinson, 18.5. And then Campaign has played in 12 games. He usually gets those minutes, I think, right around the half whenever Brunson and them really need a break, as well as Josh Hart, where he gets kind of those filler minutes when both of them need a break. He will get minutes, but 6.9 minutes a game. So you look at this rotation, and so Campaign basically not in the rotation, but 7 guys, and you're starting 5. There's not a guy under 35.7 minutes per game. That's craziness. Like, that's unbelievable. Looking at their points per game in 12 games played, 28.8 for Jalen Brunson, 19.8 for Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby 15.8, Mikal Bridges 15.4, and Josh Hart 13.2, Miles McBride 5.9, Mitchell Robinson 4.2, Precious Achiuwa 2.4, Campaign 2.0. Again, Towns not shooting it that well right now, struggling from 3 has been a big issue with him. Under 20 points per game, which is not typical for him. I would say in these postseason games that they're really going to rely on him. They're going to need him to be. And again, you add he and Brunson's contributions up, and it's right around that 50 mark again. It's 48 points per game. But still, you're not getting the same Karl Anthony Towns that you were necessarily getting in the regular season just yet, which could be kind of concerning if you're a Knicks fan. But I also know that he is a Pacer killer. So I think those numbers will be better against the Pacers just because they really struggled to defend him. But if you look at the field goal percentage, his field goal percentage, 48.1% from the field. His big thing is the 3-pointers. He's only shooting 34.1% from 3-point land. That's a tremendous help if he does the same thing. If he's just not shooting it as well as he typically does, even by a slight tick, it's really going to help the Pacers because, like I said, the Pacers have really struggled to defend him in his time against them. So anything we can knock off of Karl Anthony Towns as far as point contribution would be beneficial for the Pacers. But again, he's just not shooting it well from the 3-point line. Jalen Brunson, you look at the 3-point percentage, 36.3. Mikal Bridges, 32.8. Josh Hart's actually shooting a pretty good percentage from 3. He's just not taking a ton. Like, he only shoots about 3.6 per game, but he is shooting it at a 41.9% clip, which is really good for him. He's one of the ones, though, that they'll defensively, I think the Pacers they'll use kind of like that float. They'll try to either hide Tyrese on him or maybe allow Pascal or somebody to kind of float around in the paint. Maybe Miles Turner, give Pascal Siakam to guard Towns. I don't know. It'll be interesting, and that's something that we'll talk about here next because we'll talk about the Knicks and the Pacers rotations. But I just wanted to go through and talk about the 12 games that they've played so far in this postseason. The Knicks are averaging 106.8 points per game. They're shooting 44.4% from the field, 35.8 from three, 75% from the free throw line. They are getting 43 rebounds per game, 20 assists. They are turning the ball over 12 point. If they're doing that, I wouldn't be here. Turnovers per game, 12.9. Steals per game, 7.8, and blocks, 4.6. Looking at the Pacers and kind of how that matches up with what they've done over the playoff stretch, and the Pacers have only played 10 games because they've only needed 5 to eliminate both of the teams they've played. They've shot 50% from the field, 40.6% from three. They've shot 79.5% from the free throw line. Rebounds, 41.5 for the Pacers per game. So not too far off of what the Knicks have done, which is really good. Assists, 29.7. That's crazy. Like, that's an insane stat. The fact that they almost average a team 30 assists per night is just talks about how much they move the ball, how good Tyrese Halliburton is in that offense is, how selfless they all are, how difficult it is to game plan for them. Turnovers 12.8, which is pretty high for the Pacers. Like, they've been really good over the regular season. I think they get much better, obviously, at home with the turnover rate. And I think they'll actually be better against the Knicks. I do believe that. I just got a confidence that what they do offensively is going to be a little bit more difficult for the Knicks to handle defensively. The Cavs, I think, are a much better defensive team than the Knicks, obviously. Even the Bucks, I think, are a better defensive team. The Knicks really have good defenders. They just don't have. They have two very big liabilities in Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. And at times, I think Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby struggle with matchups. And we'll talk about those two particularly because I think even though they're good defenders, I think they'll struggle. Both of them will struggle against the matchups that they'll have. So talking about those Pacers, again, I think they've been just such a great team in the postseason that this is their first true, like, huge test. And if they get through this test, they can beat anybody. I really do believe that the Pacers can beat anybody that's left. Oklahoma City's probably the favorite right now just because of how well they're playing. But I could see Minnesota causing them a lot of problems just because I think they can do things where Denver did cause them problems. They went to Game 7 against OKC. But I think the way that the Wolves are built to be physical with Julius Randle, I think they're going to be a problem matchup for OKC. So that being said, I think the Pacers could end up with Minnesota if they advance past the Knicks. I think they can advance past the Knicks. Spoiler alert. But also, I think OKC could also end up in the finals. So I think it's a pretty well-balanced NBA Final Four, I guess you can call it, that are left. So we'll talk about that, though. And then we'll give you some predictions and who I think the Pacers or Knicks might play in the next round. That being said, let's get into the rotations and matchups because we know what the Pacers have done. They've beaten the Bucks and the Cavs in 5 games. Again, Cavs beat up, couldn't really do much against the Pacers, and I think struggled tremendously against just the depth and the persistence of that pace and the Pacers playing the way that they wanted to play. But we'll talk about just what that can mean going forward in this matchup against the Knicks. So let's talk about lineups, rotations, and matchups. All right, so looking at the lineups and the rotations that will be used. So the Pacers, again, starting lineup is going to be Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner. Bench is going to include TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Benedict Mathurin, Ben Shepherd, and Jarris Walker. Then you look at the Knicks lineup, Thomas Bryant as well. Knicks lineup and rotations. Jalen Brunson is going to start with Josh Hart alongside him, Mikal Bridges. And then you got OG Anunoby at the 4, Karl Anthony Towns at the 5, bench Mitchell Robinson, Miles McBride, Landry Shamet, Precious Achua. And that's pretty much it. Like, I don't know if Tyler Kolek will ever touch the floor, maybe if there's foul trouble or an injury. But again, I just listed him because I think he'd be the next best option. Besides, I think Precious, you'll see some just because of the pace and physicality in which the Pacers play at. So I think you'll see a little bit more of the, Thibodeau has to go there because there's foul trouble, or guys are just gassed where like he has to make a decision whether he's just going to run somebody into the ground or play somebody. But again, Thibodeau's pretty stubborn. So maybe you do just see Mitchell Robinson, Miles McBride in a random appearance from Shamet or Achua. So we'll see. That's going to be huge. And let's talk about why, because again, I think when we look at the matchups and we look at the Pacers pace and what they want to do on the offensive end and what the Knicks want to do on the offensive end, like while they are pretty similar in the amount of possessions and points per possessions and the pace number throughout the regular season, I feel like those numbers are kind of skewed. And because the Pacers have gotten so much better defensively, I think there's going to be some problems. So let's talk about what those matchups and how these can be problems for both the Pacers and the Knicks. So like I said, the Pacers and Knicks, as far as the offensive rating goes, as far as just their stats when it comes to pace, these teams are not too far off from each other in the way that they like to play according to the stats. So I'm just going to pull up here now what that looks like and how close they were. So the Pacers over the playoffs have been an offensive rating of 117.3. The Knicks 110.7. So pretty high volume, quick, very high paced teams. And I think in the playoffs, you've seen the Pacers playing at a speed a little bit higher and a pace a little bit higher than what they've played some of the season. Like I think the Bucks and the Cavs did some things that were good for Indiana and bad for Indiana as far as the pace is concerned. But in the regular season, I mean, these teams were pretty even when it comes to their offensive ratings, when it comes to their pace in which they like to play. Like the Knicks are seen more of as an up-tempo offense. Pacers definitely an up-tempo offense. They like to score points. Maybe not the best defensive teams, but teams that weren't like getting blown out of the water. But then as the Pacers got better defensively, that's when you started to see their season really change. And I think if you look at the Pacers on a 48-minute basis, I think the Pacers are a far better defensive team right now than I think what the Knicks will be able to provide. And the stats, might say that the Knicks are decent in the way that they've been able to defend, but you also have to remember the Celtics have not been very good. The Pistons don't really play with a tremendous pace. They rely heavily on some of their bigs and Cade Cunningham breaking down defenses on the dribble. Whereas the Pacers, the Knicks have not really met up with a team like this quite yet. High paced, very effective shooting the basketball. They don't live and die by the three, which the Knicks like that. The Knicks really enjoy when you try to take them off the dribble or try to beat them by shooting three-pointers. The Pacers don't really do that. The Pacers are a move the ball, a lot of motions, a lot of actions, a lot of switching, a lot more, I think, than Boston and Detroit combined. I just feel like the Pacers put you in a lot more difficult and precarious situations just because of their ability to screen guys and versatility of some of their bigs like Pascal and Miles. They're so hard to attack defensively because there are so many different mouths that are being fed that can kill you. So the Pacers, very, very good offensively, gotten much better defensively. Their pace in the playoffs, the Pacers are playing with the third highest pace. The Grizzlies we can take out of that. So the ones that are left, the Pacers are second behind Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's pace 101.18 for pace, and then the Pacers are 99.27. And then you have to go all the way down to 95.3 for the New York Knicks. Again, the Pacers are playing at breakneck speed and had been slowed down a little bit by the length of Milwaukee. The Cavs are a good defensive team. They deployed that zone that threw them off for a couple of games. So the Pacers did struggle sometimes to play at their level, but for the most part did play their pace. And when they did, they imposed their will on teams. And that's what the Knicks are going to have to try to figure out is how do we defend this team? Because I was listening to Caitlin Cooper today with Sam, and they were talking to the Knicks film podcast people, and they were talking about matchups. And I think both teams have really intriguing matchups because they're not like for like, they're not that similar. Um, they all have weaknesses and advantages against the guy that's going to be guarding them. So the way that I think the Pacers will come out initially, I think you're looking at Miles Turner is going to guard Karl Anthony Towns. Pascal is going to be on OG Anunoby. Aaron Nesmith is likely going to guard Mikal Bridges to start. Tyrese Halliburton on Josh Hart. And then you're going to have Andrew Nembhard on Jalen Brunson. Where it's going to get interesting for the Pacers defensively is if Nembhard hasn't taken that step to guard Brunson because he struggled tremendously against Brunson last year in the playoffs. So they switched to Nesmith. I think it was in game 3 where Nesmith really took on Brunson. And Brunson struggles a little bit more with Nesmith because of the length and the more physical body from Nesmith. But I think Andrew Nembhard's taken tremendous strides this year. So I think that they're going to at least start Andrew on Jalen to see if that works. Because if that works, that's a huge benefit for the Pacers, just because you can eliminate some of what Jalen Brunson is trying to do, but you're also allowing Nesmith to get more physical with somebody like a Mikal Bridges, who's not really typically known for being a physical offensive threat. So it allows Nesmith to get more physical with Mikal Bridges and keep him off the glass, keeping away from. He's a really good screener, Mikal Bridges is. So keeping him out of the pick and roll, keeping him out of the pick and pop, and the ability to try to get Brunson free from Andrew Nembhard. That being said, if they try to do that screen, then they'll just switch. The Pacers will switch. So if they're going to try the Brunson, Mikal Bridges screening actions, then they're just going to switch and have Nembhard on Mikal Bridges for a little bit, and Nesmith will then guard Brunson, who Brunson typically struggles with. I think what they'll try to do is they'll try to get Brunson and Turner switched quite a bit, or you'll see a lot of Josh Hart trying to get free from Halliburton to get, to Brunson to screen for Brunson and have Tyrese try to get on Brunson. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic because I think the way the Pacers start might not be how they finish. Could Miles Turner switch over to, I don't know, Josh Hart, kind of like what the Celtics did, where they kind of play more of a floating man? Like you'll have Turner kind of floating in the paint. You kind of tempt Josh Hart, or at least around the paint, and you try to tempt Josh Hart into shooting 3-pointers, which he's not too comfortable with. So, what do you do? Like what do those assignments look like? Could you have Aaron Nesmith guard Karl Anthony Towns at times, which Caitlin Cooper brought up, which I thought was really interesting because he's guarded guys that are bigger bodied, like Giannis. He can handle Karl Anthony Towns some. I think he could pose a problem for Karl Anthony Towns, and Towns has struggled against smaller guys like that. But I don't know where you would put Miles. It kind of messes up the rotations everywhere, or the assignments everywhere else, because Miles would then shift to Josh Hart, maybe, because I don't really know if, like, I don't see maybe Turner could guard Mikal Bridges some, but like with Mikal Bridges takes off dribbling, I don't have confidence that Miles is going to be able to stop him. So I don't know really what you would do defensively in that situation, because then Miles becomes more of a problem defensively, and then you already have an issue. Well, where Tyrese has been better. Let's not get it wrong. Like, Tyrese has been a much better defender lately, so that does help. Like, you don't really have to hide him as much as you did in seasons prior. But I do still feel that the Knicks have some things that they can do to at least take advantage of the defensive assignments. I think OG Anunoby causes some problems for Pascal because of his ability to move, and he's a little bit quicker than Pascal. He's a better. I really do think OG Anunoby's a really good player in the post when he's had Pascal on him. He's a better shot maker at times. So again, and he loves to get to the paint. So I think OG is a really tough guard for Pascal, even though Pascal will do pretty well against him. It's not, but I don't think they're not going to give OG 20 some shots. So you're not really too concerned about that there. Miles Turner, again, playing against Karl Anthony Towns, like it's just never gone well. So I do wonder what the Pacers and Rick Carlisle and Jenny Busick and the gang have up their sleeves, because Karl Anthony Towns is going to be, one, a problem, but two, I think a factor in how well the Pacers can do in this series. Because if they can keep him somewhat at bay, then I don't think the Knicks really stand a chance at all. Because I don't have confidence that playing Brunson ball is going to win them the series. They're going to have to get good contributions from obviously Karl Anthony Towns, but from every single one of their role players too. So it's got to be a pretty much flawless game from the Knicks as far as their offense is concerned, because the Pacers are going to put up points and they're going to do it at a high rate because they always do, and they shoot it very well. And the Knicks defensively. So let's talk about that. So what did the Knicks do defensively? So Jalen Brunson, they'll try to hide some, and Karl Anthony Towns too. So Towns will probably, more than likely, he's going to guard Turner to start. And then you're going to have Brunson, who's probably going to get the assignment of Nembhard. This is where Andrew Nembhard could be a huge X factor in this series, is if he's got Jalen Brunson on him and they try to face guard Tyrese or take the ball out of Tyrese's hands pretty early on in the shot clock with Mikal Bridges face guarding him for 94 feet, or if he picks him up at half court, whatever it might be, because I think Mikal Bridges will guard Tyrese to start. If Andrew Nembhard gets Jalen Brunson, which I don't think there's much of a choice. Like, I don't think OG is going to, or Josh Hart's going to, maybe. Like, Josh Hart maybe guards Nembhard, and then you have Jalen Brunson, you try to hide maybe on Nesmith. But then I think once the Pacers figure out that's going to be the case, then Nesmith is going to be the one that's just taking Brunson to the rim. And Nesmith is very good at drawing the foul. So them trying to hide Brunson is going to be a real problem, because really his only matchup is going to be Andrew Nembhard. And I feel like Nembhard could make or break this series depending on how good he's going to be against Jalen Brunson, because he could put Jalen Brunson in some very difficult situations with the pick and roll. So you could see a lot of Nembhard and Miles pick and roll, Nembhard and Pascal pick and roll. I feel like you could really see them putting Jalen Brunson into actions. And same thing with Karl Anthony Towns. I think that's a perfect pick and roll option, is putting Nembhard and Turner in actions together, because you're going to have to try to figure out what you're going to do as a Knicks defender if you're Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns, because Towns is not going to be able to stay up with Andrew Nembhard, and Jalen Brunson can't guard Miles Turner. So it'll be interesting, because I just don't know what the only matchup I'd feel confident in with the Knicks, really. Mikal Bridges is going to struggle at times with Tyrese, because Tyrese is just too quick. I do feel like I'd be pretty confident in OG being able to guard Pascal some. Like, I feel like that's a pretty decent matchup for OG. But outside of that, it's going to be very complicated for this Knicks defense. And that's where I think that the series just falls apart for the Knicks. And I'm alluding to what I'm leaning toward. But I'm trying to look at this as objectively as possible. The Knicks are going to have to score with the Pacers. And the Pacers are going to be more physical with them. They're going to move the ball more. They're going to run more. They're going to get in transition more. They're going to defend more. They're going to be more, it just on and on and on. The only thing that the Knicks really have that advantage of is being a better rebounding team. And I think that's where the advantage is going to lean towards the Knicks. But everything else, you look at, obviously the Jalen Brunson thing and Karl Anthony Towns being huge scorers, that's going to be a big advantage. But they're going to have to get good contributions from every single one of their role players every single night. And that's where the Pacers have had advantages in the series past, where they just run out of options. Like, the Pacers have said, okay, those two can beat us, but who else is going to beat us? Like, do I think OG Anunoby can have good nights? Yes. Do I think that Mikal Bridges could have a good shooting night? Yes. Do I believe they can do that consistently over 6 to 7 games? No, I don't. So that's where I think the Pacers might have that advantage, is that they're just so deep. There's just too many options for the Pacers on the attack, and defensively, I think they've gotten so much better where they can kind of steady the ship a little bit outside of the Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns show. And if Towns and Brunson aren't having a good night, this team is going to struggle. Like, they're going to struggle against this Pacer team, because what they didn't see is a good Pacers defense. Like in February, I guess you could say, but like they blew them out and the Pacers just weren't good that night. But the Pacers have been so much better defensively. And I think that's something that many fans haven't really realized yet until they face the Pacers, that the Pacers have gotten better collectively as a defensive unit. So I'm interested to see what the assignments look like, because there's just so many different options. And then you even get into like the bench, who's going to guard who on the bench. And, there's only 2 bench players coming from the Knicks side. Once Mitchell Robinson shows up, that's going to be a Miles Turner assignment, maybe even a Pascal assignment when they go small ball with Obi at the 5. Maybe you see Pascal more on Mitchell. Whoever is your better rebounder, or at least better person to get on them for a box out, that's who you put on Mitchell Robinson. And you don't worry about him really hurting you on the offensive end. So I'm very interested to see what that looks like. Who guards Benedict Mathurin when Benedict Mathurin comes in? I think a lineup that could really test the Knicks is that small 5, the small ball 5, where you have Obi Toppin at the 5, Pascal at the 4, and then you run out guards like Halliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, McConnell, Mathurin, Shepherd. So I think those could actually cause some problems because of Anunoby being out there. Like, sometimes to even counteract Anunoby, might throw a smaller guard in. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Carlisle is going to play a lot of chess here, and we'll see who's the better chess player. And right now, I believe it is Rick Carlisle over Thibodeau. So we will see. But that's why I wanted to bring up matchups and rotations, just because there is so much to go on as far as what the Pacers can do. There's not really much to go on as far as the Knicks. You know what's going to come. You know what's happening. There's only 2 players that are coming off that bench that are going to have any hand in the game. Miles McBride starting to shoot the ball. I think he was 12 of 24 in the Celtics series, which is really good. And that's somebody that the Pacers are going to have to worry about. But again, I think TJ McConnell can guard him as well. Nembhard at times, Halliburton at times can guard him. Like, Miles McBride is not somebody that I'm too concerned with. He's a good bench player, but like, outside of that, Mitchell Robinson's not really going to hurt you offensively, I don't think, except on the boards. And on the boards is where he's going to live. And defensively, he's been pretty good. So we will see. He's a good, he would have been a 6-man candidate, I think, if he plays more games and he's healthier. But he's got the tendency to be able to change games. Mitchell Robinson does. But it really is his will to want to do things. So he's shooting 39% from the free throw line. That's another thing that we'll talk about too, is that they started to do this hack-a-shack thing where Mitchell Robinson's getting fouled and going to the free throw line, and he's just not making shots. Like, he's hardly getting it to the rim. So the Pacers will do that if they get into a deficit and he's on the floor. I could see them using bodies like Jarris Walker and Thomas Bryant to just throw at them to cause them problems. So we shall see. I think Thomas Bryant will get a lot of the match the Mitchell minutes, because Thomas Bryant's actually a pretty good box out rebounder kind of guy. And honestly, if I'm Rick Carlisle, the more I think about that, the more I'd actually be interested in see how Thomas Bryant, like if Mitchell Robinson's in there and you're struggling with boards, you throw Thomas Bryant in there. I think they could actually match like for like. So we shall see. It'll be very, very interesting. This is going to be far more intriguing, I think, as far as matchups and rotations are concerned than the series past. So let's get into our next topic, and that is going to be the X Factors. The X Factors, Knicks. I'm going Mitchell Robinson. We were just talking about him. Offensive rebounds are going to be a big thing for the Pacers. They were really rough last year against the Knicks on the boards, because Josh Hart is a great rebounder. Mikal Bridges will grab rebounds. Jalen Brunson will even grab you some rebounds too. Towns will get his big body in there sometimes. But Mitchell Robinson is just a freak. So as far as rebounding is concerned. So keep that battle close, and we'll get into that in the keys of the game, or keys of the series for each team next. But Mitchell Robinson, what he does to provide some kind of boost off the bench, I think is going to be vital. And I could pick Brunson and Towns, but those are easy. Like, those are going to be guys. The only other X factor I could see is the other 3, like Hart, Anunoby, and Bridges. Like, those are going to be, if they don't play at the level they've been playing at, but better, I would even say better, than what they've been playing in, I do think the Pacers have a really good shot. X factor for the Pacers, I think it's going to be Nembhard. How does he defend Brunson? Because if he comes out and he's defending Brunson like he's defended a lot of people this year, and he's defended, I think, better players, I think the biggest thing with Brunson that you have to deal with is that head fake and that like head snapping thing he does. And Nembhard does like to get his hands into people. So I think it does look a little bit more like Nembhard is doing some of these things to him when he's trying to bait the refs. That'll be key. Like they've had a hard time with that. He loves that where he goes up with his left hand like he's going to go up with a shot and he jump fake, pump fake, and he tries to get you to fly at him. Nesmith struggles at times with that. Nembhard. The thing about Brunson too is he's one of those people that'll kind of go around a screen and he knows you're flying at him and you stop right after the screen and he'll go up to shoot and you just run right into the back of him because you're trying to fight through a screen. So I think if Nembhard comes out and he's playing him well in game one, that's going to be key in this series. I think if he comes out and he's playing really well and he's keeping Brunson below 30, that's going to be massive for the Pacers. Brunson, again, 30-point kind of guy in the playoffs. Like he's going to get his. I think that's going to be a huge X factor. So keys of the game. Sorry, keys for each team in these games. Pacers. Number one, rebound at the same rate or stay close. Again, 43 rebounds for the Knicks, 41 for the Pacers. I actually think the Knicks were better rebounding the basketball last year, especially in the postseason against the Pacers. I actually think that they could do a much better job this year against the Knicks on the boards because I think Tyrese Halliburton's better at getting rebounds. Nesmith's better. Matherin's better. Pascal seems to be more focused on it. Even Turner's been pretty decent rebounding the basketball in the playoffs. So I think you could actually see the Pacers being at least a lot better against the Knicks, which is going to be a big help for this series. And really, if I'm going into this game as Rick Carlisle, besides stopping the two offensive juggernauts in Towns and Brunson, the only other thing I'd really say that the Pacers need to focus on would be the rebounding. Like, get the rebound, keep them out of the paint, keep them off the boards, box out your man, because that's how they're going to beat you. I don't know if they can beat you if they aren't getting these offensive rebounds. So, or at least winning the rebound battle, because the way they've been shooting, they're going to miss. So you better get the rebounds. And that leads into my next point, keys of the game, pace and physicality. The Pacers are better when they run and run more than the other team wants to run. And they will. They will run this team into the ground if they continue to play the pace they've been playing in. They will just wear them down. And they might go down 2-1 in this series. They might go 1 down in the series. But the persistence of their pace and their physicality, because the Cavs complained about it, the Bucks have complained about it. The Pacers have been a much more physical team than the other teams they've played in these series. And to be honest with you, Anunoby can get physical sometimes. Mikal can get physical sometimes. Josh Hart is a physical being. Mitchell Robinson's a physical being. Outside of that, there's really not much of a physical change or challenge from the Knicks. Brunson's not going to get physical with you. Towns is definitely not going to get physical with you. So you just have to be more physical than them across the board. And the Pacers have that. They have that. If it just shows up, they're going to win that battle. They're going to win the physicality battle. Now, can you win the 50-50 balls? Can you get into the difficult spots where the Pacers oftentimes struggle to get rebounds, which is around that free throw line? Balls tend to drop there and they get a little bit complacent and don't box out, keep them from cutting. But then ultimately, those rebounds, the offensive rebounds and the defensive rebounds, those are what contribute to your pace the most, and contribute to the inability of them to be able to defend you for a long time. If the Pacers are getting some offensive rebounds and they're running all the time off these defensive, these offensive misses from the Knicks, if the Knicks are missing shots and you're just running it down their throat, they're going to have a tough time. They have 7 players that they rely on. That's pretty much it. So these guys are playing most of the game. And if you're just constantly running at them, you're going to wear them down. It's going to happen. And we've always, what's fun is that, think about this, right? This is why I get confused as to why team or why people be like Knicks in 5 or Knicks in 6 and say it with confidence, like that the Pacers don't really have a chance. The reason why is if you look at, or if you listen or you think about the times where you talk about a team advancing and moving on to the next series, and then you're previewing them like this, anytime that you ever hear somebody talk good about a team, what is one thing they always mention? Depth. They always say that depth will last. Depth is what makes teams, not breaks teams. Depth is what pushes you into a title contending team. Which two teams have the best depth left in the NBA playoffs? OKC and the Pacers. There becomes a point where depth will just win out because they aren't tired. It's not just talking about your bench players. I'm talking about your starters. Like the fact that Tyrese Halliburton's playing 34, 35 minutes compared to 39 to 40 for some of these Knicks players in a series that's going to be very physical. I'm going to go with the Pacers in that, right? So that's what I mean. Just wear this team out. Get out and run. Yes, they want to run some too, but the Knicks, in order to win this, and we'll get to that actually, I'll leave it for the next portion. Bench production and depth, like I said, goes in hand with pace and physicality. Just keep smacking them with TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Shepard shooting the ball pretty well now. Anybody and everybody. Thomas Bryant's played pretty well. Like, just throw anybody and everybody at them that are giving you good, consistent minutes. Keep the rest quiet outside of Cat and Brunson. Just talked about that. Steal game 1 or game 2. You've got to get one of these first 2 games if you're going to have a shot in the series, because you need home court advantage. And the Pacers will need that to be able to advance to their NBA finals, first NBA finals since 2000. They've got to steal game 1 or game 2. Knicks are going to have to dictate the pace. And what I mean by that is the Knicks are going to have to turn this into more of a half court, Jalen Brunson, pick and roll, and every once in a while get out and run kind of game. Because the Knicks cannot try to outrun the Pacers. If the Knicks are trying to run with the Pacers, they will not beat the Pacers. I just don't see that happening because of what the offense has looked like for the Knicks in the postseason. The Knicks in the postseason's offense is basically pick and roll action, Jalen Brunson breaking down defenses, getting around the picks, causing a little bit of difficulty in the switches, and then finding OG Anunoby. Like OG Anunoby's not really known for his ISO. Mikal Bridges is not really known for his ISO. Josh Hart definitely not. Like Jalen Brunson's got to get those actions going, or you've got to get Cat open to where he's breaking down defenses, where he's, distributing the ball to some of these cutting wings, which is something you don't have to worry about if you're the Pacers, or these wings that like to cut. Like, you can't leave OG, you can't lose Mikal, you can't fall asleep because they'll cut you up. But if I'm looking at the Pacers, I don't want to get in the half-court game and this Jalen Brunson ball of half-court games with Jalen. But even though the Pacers have been I think they've been one of the best or the best in half-court offenses too. So, I mean, the Pacers have been just an incredible offensive team in the postseason. But possession battle, again, like I said, Knicks are going to have to win the turnover and offensive rebounding battle to have a chance against the Pacers. Cat's involvement, if Cat's scoring 30 points a game, the Pacers are going to have a real tough time beating the Knicks. Transition D on a miss, the Knicks got to get back. And they're Karl Anthony Towns. This is where I think you can just run him straight into the ground. Just run. Just constantly go. Because he's going to get worn out. He's not going to shoot as well because his legs aren't underneath him. The Pacers can put him in a blender if they really focus on doing that. And I think they can. And then number 5, if you can take Tyrese, this is what the teams have to do. And I think you've got to have a top elite on-ball defender to do this. Josh Hart, I think, is the closest thing they have, but they're going to try out Mikal Bridges because Mikal Bridges is length. But you've got to take him away 94 feet. And you have to make Andrew Nembhard beat you, because that's really your only shot of stopping Tyrese, is making another player beat you as the point guard. And, the Celtics, or sorry, not the Celtics, the Cavs did that pretty well at times. Bucks too. But over a 5 to 6 game series, it just becomes harder because we adjust. The Pacers adjust to them picking full court, and they run some screens up towards the half court and get Tyrese loose. So we'll see what happens with the Knicks. I don't think they really have a good defender to really stop Tyrese. So I think Tyrese is actually going to have a little bit more flexibility here than he did in other series. So we'll see. But I think Tyrese is actually going to be able to get into the offense more so than any of the other series that he's been in. Pacers win this series if they stay close in the rebounding battle. Pacers win this series if they play their pace. And the Pacers win this series if they continue to play the way that they have been. If they continue to play like they did against Cleveland, they'll beat the Knicks. They really will. Pacers lose this series if the Knicks dominate the glass or did what they did last year in the rebounding battle. If the Pacers aren't winning or at least staying close, if their Pacers are getting beat by 8 to 10 rebound, like that they're going to lose this series. Pacers are going to lose the series if they allow Josh Hart, Anunoby, and Bridges to get hot. If one of them starts to get hot and they're scoring 15, 20 every single night, and two of them are 15, 20 every single night, like if two of them are scoring those, then they're going to be almost impossible to beat because Towns and Bridges are Towns and Brunson are going to give you 50 points a night. So at least if you can stop the other ones from really having good nights, then you're going to send the Knicks home. And then Pacers lose this series if they don't win one of the first two games. If they go back to Gamebridge, even down 2-0, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for the Pacers to win. So, series predictions, and this is wrapping it up. Tyrese Halliburton arrives as a superstar in this series. I actually think this could be the series he goes 20-10. Like I could see him because of the shooting night he had against Cleveland, because he knows what's at stake. I think you could see Tyrese Halliburton finally average 20 points a game, and then the assists just come along with it because of how good he's playing offensively. Cat and Brunson have a big series. I think they both average over 25 points a game. Obi Toppin will have a 20-point game. Nembhard and Nesmith both have 20-point games as well, and each separately. And then I think the depth is what kills the Knicks. The depth will be something where the bench is outscoring, the Pacers bench is outscoring the Knicks bench by 20, maybe 15. Like I think it's going to be that drastic. I think the Pacers bench will be that good. And then my final prediction, the prediction we've all been waiting for the rest or for the whole show. What do I think the Pacers and Knicks series ends as? Who goes to the NBA Finals? Well, first, in the Western Conference, I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves will beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games. I think that the Wolves just have veteran experience that is key for these kind of games. Randall's playing extremely well. Their bench has been really good. Jaden Daniels has been good. Conley's there. Like, I just feel like the Timberwolves are going to be able to do things. DiVincenzo, who's been there before. I think that the Wolves present a different kind of challenge where they've got a more well-rounded team than Denver does. And Denver gave OKC all they could handle. I think Minnesota is a better defensive team than Denver. I think Anthony Edwards is going to go explosive and nuclear on this team. I think that it's going to be a 6-game series, and I think the Minnesota Timberwolves come out of the West. And I think the Indiana Pacers will head to their first NBA Finals after 25 years. I think they beat the Knicks in 6 games. And I will go as far as to say, I will go out on a limb here. And I don't want to get overconfident or that, I don't want the basketball gods to come after me for this one. But I actually do think it could be possible the Pacers could win this in 5. I might be the only one that says that, but I feel really confident in this series. I just feel like the Pacers have a team that is going to be very difficult for the Knicks to stop because they're not good defensively. They're not as good as Cleveland, and they're not as good as the Bucks defensively. They have 2 really good scorers. However, I wonder how Karl Anthony Towns handles this Eastern Conference Finals. He just doesn't strike me as somebody that's going to have that massive series where it's like, I think it's a big series for him, but I don't think he's going to have one of those 30 points games, maybe one, and it's a game they win. Like he goes off for 30 points and then you don't really hear much from him. Like I think what's setting up is the Knicks questioning if Karl Anthony Towns is really the person that's going to carry them to that next level. I don't buy it. He's not done it. So we'll see. He could prove me wrong. Could the Knicks win it in 5? Sure. Could they win in 6? Sure. If the Pacers don't come out and play well. But like if the Pacers come out and stink, that's how I think the Knicks beat them. I I don't buy the Knicks. I don't. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think it goes? I think Pacers in 6, could be 5. I feel pretty confident. I just think their defense is too good. Their depth is going to run this team into the ground. And I just don't buy that the Knicks are playing that well. Like, they've struggled against Detroit and they struggled against Boston. And now they're up against a team that's been there, done that has the continuity, that I think the Pacers are going to come in as the underdog for many reasons. And the Pacers are going to come in and say, nope, not again. Let me know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. Rate us over where you can find podcasts such as Apple Podcast and Spotify. It helps people find us. When you subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube, it also helps people find us. And we are on YouTube. So if you want to subscribe, sorry. That's all, folks. If you want to subscribe, head over to YouTube. We are going to be talking about the Indiana Fever game that's happening on Tuesday. We'll recap game 1 as well. The Fever did win that game over the Chicago Sky, and with authority. The Fever crushed Chicago. So we will talk about game 1 and game 2 of the Indiana Fever season in a combined episode coming up on Wednesday. I've just run out of time. Like, we were traveling all weekend, and I wanted to get this Pacer preview, and I knew it was going to be a longer episode because it's an Eastern Conference Finals game. It's against the Knicks. We know these guys. There's a long history, so I wanted to share that as well. So hopefully you enjoyed that part of the episode. Go back and watch the Knicks Pacers highlights. Go watch Winning Time, Reggie Miller. I think it's on Netflix. So it's Disney Plus. That's where it is. So go watch that. I think that's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go watch some of that before I head off to bed. So thanks for sticking along. If you stuck around this long, again, we are at the Pacers Fever Show on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'll be Xing, I guess that's what you call it, throughout the Eastern Conference Finals. But we will be back on I think on Thursday after the game to recap. So Thursday morning, hopefully, we will be here to talk about the Pacers game 1 Eastern Conference Finals at Madison Square Garden against the New York Knicks. Can't wait to see what happens. If the Pacers can get game 1, I'm feeling really confident in what the Pacers can do for the rest of their time in the NBA playoffs this year. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. And I'm saying this. Let's do it. Let's go Pacers. Let's steal game 1, Madison Square Garden. For Reggie Miller.